Throughout every culture in the world, art has been a medium to convey the deepest sentiments of the human heart. By exploring the arts of a culture, we can gain a deeper understanding of the values that move its people. In Tibetan culture, art has been not just a physical object, but a transcendental tool closely interlinked with the Buddhist idea of liberation. So deeply has Buddhism permeated the minds of the Tibetan people that their faith is reflected in every art form, from the auspicious symbols used to decorate traditional architecture and furniture to the complex depiction of the deities in statues and thangkas. Tibetan artistic techniques have been passed down in an unbroken continuity from master to the student for many centuries. It is our aim at Norbulingka Institute in Dharamshala to ensure that the unique art forms of Tibet will continue to be practiced in their pristine forms for many generations to come. We began in the 1980s, and the ground plan for our temple and other buildings is based on the proportions of the thousand-armed Avalokiteshvara, the patron bodhisattva of Tibet. Over the years, we have trained hundreds of students in the traditional arts, reinvigorating an entire generation of artists and raising the standards by which objects of religious arts are made. Thangka painting is a Tibetan religious art dating back to the 7th century. It is based on the proportion of deities as they are recorded in the Buddhist scriptures. Because Thangka is not merely an aesthetic art, but is mainly to serve a spiritual purpose, it is essential that all of these measurements be strictly adhered to. Usually, the proportions of the deities originated from the visions of great masters at the moments of realization and are thus considered sacred. All Thangka students begin by mastering the proportions of the Buddha's head. Learning to draw a perfect Buddha's head alone can take several months. Students then move on to the forms of other deities. The colors for all the various deities are also specified by the scriptures. The highest quality Thangkas use mineral pigment for color. Stones and minerals are crushed and mixed with water. The mineral you see here is cinnabar, used as a bright red in Thangkas. The mixture is then let to dry and become a pigment powder. To create a traditional canvas, a cotton cloth is tied to a wooden frame. It is then stitched to the frame, ensuring it will remain in place. Once the stitching is finished, the canvas is tightened, creating an even tautness across the entire surface. Glue and gesso are applied to the canvas, which preserve the vibrancy of the pigments once they're applied. Many coats are given to both sides of the canvas. It is then let to dry in the sun. Once it is dry, the canvas should have the buoyancy of a drum. The canvas is then rubbed smooth with a glass or a stone, and the surface becomes glossy as the texture of the cloth is evened out. Artists first use the pencil to sketch the iconographic grids onto the canvas. Using these grids as guidelines, they then fill in the forms of the deities. Once the entire image is drawn in pencil, it is outlined in black. Shading of the landscapes in the thankas is applied using a dry brush technique requiring thousands of individual strokes. Shading is an extremely difficult technique, and as shading is applied to the entire thanka, individual colors must be mixed from the base pigments for each hue, and one stroke out of place will be apparent. It is said that in the creation of one flower alone, a master thanka artist will apply 100 shadings. The apprenticeship of a thanka artist at Norbulingka lasts for 6 years. The first 3 years are devoted to dedicated study, while in the final 3 years, apprentices join our studios and practice on actual thankas under the close instructions of the master. After the 6-year course, the students are considered professional artists, but it will take many more to become masters. Once the thanka is completed, a silk brocade border is created to match the size and color of the thanka in the traditional bell shape. Wooden dowels are then added to the top and bottom for convenient hanging. A cover called shekyap in Tibetan is then made of red and yellow silk to protect the thanka from environmental elements. Finally, the thanka is placed into the brocade border and stitched in place. The thanka seen here is the mandala of Amitayus. A mandala thanka is a two-dimensional representation of an actual palace where the deity is said to dwell. Once the thanka is consecrated, it is ready to be used in serious meditational practice. Thanka applique is a special method of creating thankas with precious silk. In Tibetan, they are known as Goishan thanka or precious cloth scrolls. The basic proportions of applique thanka are the same as painted ones, taken directly from the Buddhist scriptures. The final piece is a patchwork of thousands of individually embroidered pieces. When making an applique thangka, a stencil of the deity is created on translucent paper, following Buddhist iconographic grids. Using a needle, small holes are then perforated around the outline of the image. For each individual piece to be embroidered, chalk powder is rubbed over the stencil to transfer the design onto the fabric. The design is then traced onto the cloth using a brush or a pencil. The chalk is brushed away, leaving only the outlined image. To begin the embroidery process, strands of Mongolian horsetail are wrapped with silk fiber. This creates an extremely strong and flexible thread, which naturally adjusts to the changes in environmental conditions and prevents warping. This cord, created from silk-wrapped horsetail, is then stitched around the border of each piece, creating a bold outline. This technique, called couching, began in Central Asia, and over the centuries, it gradually spread to Tibet across the Silk Road. Just like a collage made out of fabric, each piece is then cut out and finished individually. Now, all of the pieces can be assembled in layers to form the entire design. Constructed of thousands of hand-cut and embroidered pieces of silk and brocade, these elaborate creations require many months of work. Just as in thangka paintings, the color of each piece is explicitly specified by the scriptures. Our tailors expertly sew the pieces together along the outlines so that not a single stitch is visible. The landscape of the thangka is created separately from the body of the deity, and at the end, when both are finished, the deity is placed onto its silk background and sewn into place. The final result is a spectacular and vibrant patchwork design, a true tribute to the spirit of Buddhist art. Statues of deities, just like thangka appliques and paintings, are based on the exact proportions taken from Buddhist scriptures. After practicing the iconographic grids for the first few years of their training, the students then move on to work three-dimensionally. Using a variety of hammers and chisels, the piece is worked on from both sides, with complementary techniques known as repousse and chasing. Dimension is added from the back, while shaping and details such as delicate folds in the clothing are hammered into the front to create an entirely lifelike form. The back and front of all body parts are created separately, and once the facets are complete, the proportions are rechecked and can be soldered together. First, the copper is heated by a flame, and then the seams are soldered together using brass. Under direct heat, a tool guides the brass into place to seal the pieces together. The statue is then cooled in a bath of diluted sulfuric acid to restore the original reddish glow. This entire process is repeated for each body part. Natural resin is melted into the hollow space to provide support from behind as the statue is hammered from the front, ensuring that it does not dent in ways which the artist does not intend. Using chisels, the entire surface of the statue is smoothened and evened. Even more detailed pieces of the statue, such as the ornaments of the deities, are also worked on a bed of resin, which allows for shaping of intricate and precise details. The copper is then polished to a shine. Finally, the pieces can be assembled. They are constructed with such precision that they fit together as seamlessly as a jigsaw puzzle. Smaller statues are created using a sand casting process. A metal model of the statue to be cast is first filled with a mixture of sand and molasses to create a mold of the inside of the statue. At the same time, a mold is created for the outside of the statue by pressing the metal model into a base of sand and molasses. Once the mold is created, the inner mold along with the metal model can be removed. The inner mold is then placed inside the outer mold, and the space left empty will be the area which is filled with copper, thus creating an exact replica of the original statue. The two sides are then placed together, and a hole is made through which to pour the molten copper. Once the copper reaching its melting point of above 1000 degrees centigrade, it is then removed from the forge and poured directly into the complete mold. After the metal has solidified, the mold is removed and the burnt sand can be easily hammered off. The metal mold can be used many times, but the inside and outside molds must be created anew for each statue. In this way, because the mold imprints a little differently each time, even casted statues seem to have a unique expression. While the main part of the body is cast as one piece, smaller parts such as the arms and ornaments are cast separately. After casting, the entire statue is carefully filed and smoothened with chisels. The individual parts are then ready to be assembled. The statue is then passed to the Thangka painting section, where our painters add the finishing touches. A pure gold paint is used for the faces, which has a matte look and reflects light similar to how skin does. The features of the faces are added, and the last stage is painting or opening the eyes of the statue. Precious and semi-precious gems are added as ornaments. Favorites among Tibetans are pearls, turquoise and lapis lazuli. Now, the statue is ready to be consecrated, a special ritual whereby the spirit of the deity is called into the statue so that it may bestow its blessings. Wood carving is another ancient Tibetan art form primarily employed in traditional architecture and furniture. Beginning wood carving, students first master a vast range of designs, starting with the 8 auspicious symbols. Wood carvers also learn to make and care for all of their own chisels, which they will keep with them throughout their lives. Artists use over 40 different tools to bring out the motifs from the wood, each of which has a different role in the process. To begin, they use a mallet and a flat chisel to create an outline of the design. With the fret saw, they then cut out the negative spaces in the image. Once the wood is carved from both front and back sides, the panels are assembled to form the whole piece, without the use of any hardware or nails, but with ingeniously fitted joints that can be easily packed or set up. This type of portable furniture is well adapted to the traditionally nomadic Tibetan lifestyle, where families would have to move frequently to follow their herds. For some wooden pieces, Norbulingka artists use a special technique of painting known as kimbur in Tibetan. This traditional relief painting is commonly found decorating the walls of temples as well as on furnitures and household accessories. The technique requires an extremely steady hand, as the whole design must be outlined in one stroke, or the thickness of the line will not be consistent. Kimbur adds a third dimensional aspect to painting, and the designs just seem to pop off their flat surfaces. Norbulingka also takes inspiration from Tibetan motifs to create a range of clothing, accessories, and household furnishings, updated for a modern lifestyle. We strive to create products of the highest quality, and each piece is handmade with care. Much of the cloth used to create our clothing, guest house linens, and canvas accessories is created within the Norbulinka weaving workshop. Using primarily shuttle flow looms, we create a fine variety of custom woven blends, sourced from the Indian fiber states of Assam, West Bengal, Bihar, and Madhya Pradesh. After being woven, the cloth is then passed on to our tailoring section, where the tailors stitch Norbulinka's signature collections developed by our designers. Our favorite fabrics to use are cotton, bamboo, banana, wool, and wild harvested silk. In our art shop, located within the institute, one can find all of the products created in the Norbulinka workshops. It is our aim to create works of the highest quality using only the finest materials and craftsmanship to highlight the splendor of Tibetan art. By strictly adhering to the methods by which sacred artworks are made, we wish to create pieces worthy of being objects of support in the spiritual path of individuals. Thankas and statues are used as a focal point for prayers and offerings. Practitioners also use them to develop a clear mental image of the deities, which aids them in advanced meditational practices. All the proceeds from Norbulinka's sales go directly back into the institute to support our various sections and provide livelihood for a community of over 500 people. Each year, Norbulinka welcomes thousands of visitors from around the world, inviting them to learn more about Tibetan arts and their unique expression in religion and culture. The Loseling Doll project was an initiative of some artist monks from the Loseling College, a section of Drepung Monastery. The idea was to create replicas of people from all walks of life as a way to display and preserve the knowledge of the traditional costumes of Tibet. Extensive research was done on the appropriate costumes for each area, and great care was taken to use the same materials which would have been used for the originals. The result is both an ethnographic record and a work of art. The Deden Suklakhang, or the seat of happiness, is the spiritual center of Norbulinka. Inside, one can find some of the greatest masterpieces created by our artists. The 14-feet gilded statue of Buddha Shakyamuni, which is the largest of its kind outside Tibet. Our largest Thangka applique, over 30 feet tall, also hangs in the temple, depicting the Buddha and his 16 main disciples. Thangka murals on the walls portray his life story until his passing into parinirvana at the age of 80. Frescoes also show the portraits of the 14 reincarnations of the Dalai Lama. Also housed in the temple is a complete canon of the Tibetan Buddhist scriptures. The Kangyur is the recorded words of the Buddha, while the Tengyur are the commentaries interpreting his teachings composed by great Buddhist masters. In addition to the Tibetan arts, Norbulingka also places emphasis on preserving the rich literary traditions of Tibet. One such project is the official biography of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. As many of the records prior to 1959 were lost, this has been a monumental research task, and a team of scholars has compiled the biography by consulting thousands of sources and conducting countless interviews. Because the 14th Dalai Lama has been so active in the political affairs and in the world arena, his biography can serve as a modern history of Tibet and will be a great resource to the scholars. Another project is the compilation of an encyclopedia of the Tibetan culture. This includes articles written on subjects from various regions of Tibet, famous public figures, diverse customs and traditions. 20 years in the making, the encyclopedia is now ready for printing and distribution among the Tibetan centers of learning. We recognize that any endeavor to preserve a culture must include education as a main component. It is crucial to instill in younger generations a sense of pride in their cultural identity. The Academy of Tibetan Culture provides a fully funded 3-year course to 20 young scholars. The students are taught Tibetan grammar, philosophy, history, poetry, drawing and medicine, as well as English and Chinese. After completing the course, students contribute as conscientious members of the society, working as researchers, editors, teachers, and writers. Many of them join Norbulingka after their graduation, becoming an integral part of our community. We also run an open clinic where the staff and their families receive free care. Our welfare fund, to which all the members of the community contribute, provides partial medical insurance to the staff. Norbulingka offers daycare and kindergarten free of cost to all the children of our staff. Parents are assured that their children are nearby and being looked after with the greatest care. Older children are taught according to the Montessori method, which encourages kids to explore the world on their own, learning through experiences. The Montessori method is based on freedom and independence and believes that self-exploration is the best teacher. Children are encouraged to follow their own interests and learn by doing rather than listening. The teachers, too, are trained to trust these instincts of the children. Tibetans have adopted many of the traditional Montessori materials to their own culture and language. Today, there are close to 87 children nurtured by a loving staff of 17. Growing up together, our kids provide a bond for the entire Norbulingka community and help bring us closer. Providing early childhood education in Tibetan plays a large role in preserving the culture, as kids are taught traditional wisdom and values from an early age. A culture is not a single entity, but a combination of all the customs and traditions which make it up. It is our hope at Norbulingka to be able to preserve these traditions so that they are available to the future generations and the profound wisdom which bloomed in the Tibetan culture may continue to benefit the world.